I'd like to invite each one to pick up your Bible and to turn to Genesis 3 and verse 1. Rhodes and Cindy are taking a little time off to themselves, and we're very pleased about that. And meanwhile, you got me again. So we're going to try to do something a little bit different, and maybe not that much off of the course that Rose has been following. The idea of tracing genealogies has been his study and the beginnings of things. And I'd like to go back to Genesis 3 and 1 and look at somewhat of the... I'm going to ask each of you to be open-minded tonight. I guess I always do that. But I'd like us to think as if we are hearing some of these things for the first time, and I know it won't be. It's going to take a hard struggle for you to think afresh about things like this. This is the chapter that tells of the sin of Eve and then of Adam and eating of the forbidden fruit, and that tells of the serpent in verse 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. Now in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, chapter 1. We've already had that study. Okay? What about the angels? And what about Satan and his heavenly host? When was he created? Well, all the information that we have is that he also was created at that time. Here was the beginning of all things. He is a creation of God. He's not an immortal God in any sense, without a beginning or without an end. The only one who is without a beginning and without an end is God, is Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Father, the Holy Spirit. They are eternally past, present, and future. So what we're looking at here is a creature of God, and the word here is the serpent. Okay? The word serpent, as we read the story, some things occurred to us that obviously this is more than just a snake. Okay? Because right off the bat, in at the last half of that verse, he said to the woman, did God actually say, you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? How many snakes have you talked to lately? Okay, now that's a clue, is it not? Okay. Could this be a talking like a parrot? But can you have a conversation with a parrot? They can say words, but they are parroting. They're not human. You can't talk to a parrot. Is there any other creature that can vocalize and talk that you can have a conversation with?
I did hear a story once about a donkey.
Yeah. And that was extraordinary, wasn't it? That was obviously a miracle of God. You usually don't hear donkeys talking. Balaam had quite a surprise, didn't he? So what I want to suggest to you tonight is that we try to get the point. God's giving us a lesson here. He's trying to make a point. And this is written in the Hebrew language. It's written by Moses. Moses wrote the first 5 books. They're called the 5 books of Moses. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Books of Moses, written. And therefore, at some time, after perhaps they had left Egypt, while perhaps they were wandering in the desert for 40 years, at some point in there, Certainly, we know Deuteronomy was written at the very end of Moses' life. These were a series of sermons that he preached to them as a kind of farewell. But here in the book of Genesis, the Lord through Moses is preparing a brand new people to enter into the promised land. He promised the land to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, chapter 15. Several times it was repeated to the patriarchs, this promise that they would have this land. They had to wait until the iniquity of the Amorite was full. That's what, in one vision, that God told Abraham. So now that time has come. And what we have God doing is God is preparing His people to enter the promised land. There's a lot they have to learn. Where have they been for the last several years? They've been in Egypt as slaves, right?
400 years there.
They're 400 years of course, we don't know at what point, that they became slaves. But certainly it was for generations that they had known slavery. And who were their masters? The Egyptians. What kind of religion did they have? Okay, they had many gods. And we had an earlier study in Exodus, I think you're having them right now, where during the plagues, each of the plague featured one of the animals in the pantheon of the Egyptian temple. And so they worshiped all of these different animals, and the sun, and the moon, and the stars, and the snakes. And in the crown of the Pharaoh, there on the walls painted, you can go and see them in the British Museum if you travel in London someday. It'd be a great place to visit. You can see actual examples of the artwork of the ancient Egyptian priests. And they depict the crown of Pharaoh, and they're in the crown of Pharaoh. Of course, you have the sun, and then below the sun, you have two snakes. Why snakes? Why would they worship snakes? Well, that's what we're going to kind of think about. We're going to try to think about and understand, because as you read in the Old Testament, the references to snakes, there are certain things that come to mind, that are taught to us. The very Hebrew words themselves teach us a lot. Why would the word serpent be here if it was not actually a snake talking to Eve? Now, I'm not going to tell you it wasn't a snake, but I'm going to suggest to you that it was not a snake. Okay, I'm going to suggest, okay, that the word for serpent here is a word nakash. And I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right, but it's something like that. And there are a number of similar words like that are used. There's about 5 or 6 different words in the Hebrew language that are used in the Old Testament to refer to different serpents. This word that is used, it's the most common word for serpent, is a word that describes the sound of a snake. Now, if you can remember back from your kindergarten days, what sound does a snake make? Hiss. Okay. It makes a hiss. Okay. It's nahash. Okay. So the name for snake is a word that refers to the whispering of the snake. Now, did you ever watch the cartoon Robin Hood? Okay, I grew up with that. Okay, and who was the counselor to the king? Hiss. And he was always whispering in the ear of the king, and he kept this was the the prince. He kept tickling his ear because of his tongue, getting in his ear. Okay, the idea, therefore, is not far from the classic idea of why snakes were a symbol of wisdom and counsel. That's how they were worshipped in Egypt. And not just in Egypt, but also among the Greeks. In the New Testament, you may have heard me talk about Acts chapter 16 and the spirit of divination that the young lady, the 12-year-old girl, had. And it's an unusual word. It's not the ordinary word for like unclean spirit in the Gospels. Spirit of divination is a spirit of, the word for divination is a word for snake. It's the word python, okay? Literally python, okay? The messenger to the gods among the Romans, what was his name, you remember? You guys from mythology, Roman mythology? Apollo, okay? Apollo was depicted as a snake. And they would have the python, the young women who went into a trance and began to speak in tongues and deliver the message of the gods. This would happen in the entrance of a cave. And it was believed that the cave had an entrance into the underworld of the dead. And they would communicate with the dead or with the gods. And Apollo would come from Hades, from the realm of the dead, and come to the mouth of the cave as a snake and communicate, but invisibly, of course, nobody could see him. But with these young women who had the spirit of a divination. A divination is very much in this word, nahash, okay? Kings have sought witches and necromancers and enchantresses throughout human history. The Persian king that consulted the oracle of Delphi in Greece before the war with the Greeks. I mean, imagine coming to an oracle in Greece when he's about to have a war fighting against the Greeks. But he was consulting in this very same way that throughout all history of idolatry, people have sought enchanters or necromancers. Now, this word, as we consider it, I'd like you to think of as a name for Satan, because we have other names for Satan, don't we? Give me some names for Satan. Okay. We have Beelzebub. We have, what did you say?
The deceiver.
The deceiver. What does the word Satan mean? Adversary. Okay. I haven't heard the most common word. I'm sorry? Lucifer. Okay. The devil. Okay. I think Lucifer's a false start, because I think that's probably not what that's talking about in Isaiah 14. We're going to go to Isaiah 14. We are going to go there. Pardon? Dragon in the book of Revelation. In fact, in Revelation 12, he started out with a dragon trying to swallow up this a man-child that the woman is in labor to deliver. And then the child is caught up to heaven. Of course, that's Jesus. And that's dragon. And you get down to about verse 12 of chapter 12, or 11, somewhere in there. And what you're looking at is, this is not just the dragon, this is the serpent. Okay? Yes?
So I actually turned there because I thought that's where you were going. In verse 9,
Yeah.
It says, a great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan.
Okay. So he's got all these names. So would it not be reasonable to take the word serpent here as a name for Satan? Is this not Satan? So we get fixated on the snake because who's not afraid of snakes? What woman does not scream and run? There's a lot of them that don't. But, and we associate this as a prophecy about a curse on snakes. And that because of this curse on snakes, snakes no longer have legs. They crawl on the ground. I've heard that all my life. And I've looked real carefully for legs on the snake, and I know they've got these two little things, toward the back of the snake that look like it might have been legs. And if a good evolutionist would have this as vestigial organs, where it once used to stand on its feet and walk. And I think we're missing the point, because the idea of crawling on your belly and eating dirt is later in the prophecies a way of describing the curse or condemnation of various peoples. So this could more likely be in chapter 3. Let's go ahead and read that. Whenever you get down to the curse.
Can I make a
Yes, go ahead.
Because you're going to be reading from ESV, right?
Yes, I am.
So ESV, it puts the serpent was more crafty, and then when the woman is referring to it, says verse 13, the serpent deceived me. So it sounds like it's using a definite article, but that's not there.
Right.
It's just this name that you're
Right.
talking
Right. Let's go ahead and read that verse 14. The Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Now that last verse, verse 15, is a classic prophecy that we have identified for a long time as a prophecy against Satan. Okay? But we kind of separate that from the enmity between him and the woman, and his offspring and her offspring. Okay? As if, no, that's about the snake, and this is about Satan. And I don't think you have to do that, because the enmity is between Satan and the woman. The enmity is between her offspring. Now remember, who were her offspring? Everybody. What does the word Eve mean? Mother of all living. Okay? So this is a statement of enmity between Satan and all humanity, because he is the adversary, Satan, of human beings. And so then he says, he shall bruise your head. Now, later in the Gospels, in the New Testament, you have that expression used, where the Apostle Paul says, and he shall, and you shall, how's it put it? I've got, you're going to trample his, Satan, under your feet. Something like that. In other words, it's a reference back to this there in the language of the apostles. And I've got that later here in the study. I'm just trying to give you a kind of a summary of where I want to go with this, because I've got some more surprises for you. Okay? Now, the three words that are most commonly used that tie together to Satan and the snake or serpent is Nahash or Nakash. Like the Germans, when they have an H, it's a, and so it's kind of hard to say H. And what they do a lot of times, they put a K there, so you can say Kash and Nakash. Then the next word is seraph. How about that? Okay. Tell me, have you ever heard of seraphim? What is a seraphim? What is a seraph? It's an angel. How do you know that? Where do you hear about the seraphim? It's Isaiah, okay? And when Isaiah first saw God in Isaiah 6, when he was called to be a prophet, and in his vision of God, there were the seraphim, and they were flying. Remember that? They had how many wings? 6. 6 wings. With 2 they covered their face, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they would fly. Okay? It took me a bit of study to figure this out, because I thought maybe the word seraph, I read somewhere that they had to do with the wings, but that's not what the word means. But you do have here the seraphim were flying. Okay? We have later in Isaiah, and going back to Numbers and Deuteronomy, we have the fiery serpents. Remember those? What was the story of the fiery serpents? They were complaining about God's care for them in the desert, so God sent these fiery serpents. What do you suppose fiery serpents would imply? Well, they were biting them, right? And yeah, it was a fiery bite. Okay, that would not be hard to figure out. And they were dying. And what did God tell Moses to do? Make a bronze serpent, okay, and lift it up and do what? Okay, anyone who would look at the bronze serpent would be healed. And then later, of course, that's used in the New Testament, because Jesus talks about being lifted up, even as Moses lifted up the brass serpent, or the bronze serpent. Okay? Now that word fiery serpent is the word seraph or saraph. Some of these words I'm going to have to struggle with a little bit, because you understand that in Hebrew there are no vowels written down, only consonants. The vowels are A, E, I, O, U, in case you didn't know. Okay, those are your vowels. And so it's all consonants. And that's the way Egyptian was. That's the way Hebrew was. That's the way Arabic was. That's the way the Aramaic language was. And later what happened, as they would write the words in the Masoretic text of the Hebrews, they would make little marks here and there on the consonants to indicate what the vowels might be. But it's been a long dead language, and so we don't know how it sounded. That's why we struggle with the word Jehovah. We don't know exactly how it sounded. We have the 4 consonants, YHVH or YHWH. When you're going from one language to another, you have a problem with letters sometimes, because there's different equivalences. But in any case, seraph meant to burn. Okay? Now, here's the interesting thing about that. What's the other thing that fire does besides burn? It gives light. Okay, now you're starting to see why the idea of burning and of light might be associated with the snake, or with the symbol of the snake. The angels of light are described as burning like a torch, okay? So there's a double duty that this word serves. It speaks of the burning venom of the bite, but it also speaks of something else, okay? The idea of light being shown. Now, light is that which gives wisdom. And so that becomes a central part of God's message. Now, the necromancers and the enchanters and the witches and all those, they were all frauds, but they promised to give light. And what does Satan promise to Eve? What does Satan say? If you'll disobey God and eat the forbidden fruit, what will happen to you? You become wise like God. There's your light. Okay? But what was the problem? It was a lie. They did not become wise like God. They became Sinners. Did they discover something that they didn't know before? Yes. They discovered they were naked. They discovered by experience the stain of sin. They had knowledge of sin they didn't have before. Yeah, they have light in a sense, but it's light about something bad. And that's basically what he gave them. Now, that is a great deal of what Moses is dealing with, God is dealing with in Israel. Because their idea of light comes from the witches and the enchanters. Remember, whenever Moses went before Pharaoh, God told him to go to Pharaoh, and Moses said, no, hey, we're wasting our time. They're not going to listen to me. Why would Pharaoh listen to me? And what did God tell him? What is that in your hand? Okay? Now he says, throw down the staff. And Moses threw down the staff, and what happened to it? It turned into a snake. Okay? Now remember what that would do to the Egyptians. What do the Egyptians believe? The snakes are wise. Okay? Listen to this man. He threw his staff down, and it became a snake, a serpent. But then you had your enchanters. And then they threw down their rods. And through their enchantment, Satan is very clever. Those who were led by Satan are very clever. They're very intelligent. They're very crafty. That becomes a theme in the New Testament. In 2 Corinthians 2 and 11, we are not ignorant of his devices. He's very crafty. We have to be aware of that. Yes, Rachel?
You know, you also got to remember that when that occasion occurred, that Moses' staff/serpent ate the
Absolutely.
staff/serpent, and if you think about it, you got the fake light being eaten by the true light.
That's right. So here, by demonstration, God caused the staff of Aaron, then, which became a snake, to consume all the others, all the lies. What happens when you shed the light in darkness? What happens to darkness? Disappears because of the light. And you have that here as well. Now, that's the direction that I'm going tonight. And there's a lot of scriptures I'd like to be able to share with you, and I won't get to it. I have an outline, and Lord willing, if you want it, I'd be glad to send it to you. But there's a third word that we're going to look at also. The word for dragon in the Old Testament is from Tanin, Tannin. And this is the word that you have in Genesis 1, where on the fifth day, God created the sea monsters. Okay? And the word sea monsters is the word Tanin. When you have the word dragon in the book of Isaiah, it's also from Tanin. In the book of Job, when you have the word Leviathan, it's the word Tanin. Okay? And when you have in the book, I think the word Leviathan also occurs in Isaiah. But it's also, even though in one place it's called dragon, in other places it's called Leviathan, it's the same word. It's the Hebrew word. Tanin. They had, Isaiah said they had flying serpents. That's in Isaiah. We don't have flying serpents today. Was that a mythical thing? I don't think so. I think that was an animal that they had then that we don't have now. They have, in Noah's day, they had dinosaurs that we don't have today. There's many animals that have become extinct. And you have ancient writings about flying serpents that were about 5 feet long and that had a large head that appeared to have a crown on it. So the Greek historian Herodotus talked about them and as being in Egypt. And the word basilis was the name that he used in Greek. Like in Harry Potter, you know, the snake was basilis. That's where she got that. Okay? we do have archaeological carvings and drawings of a dragon-like reptile about 5 feet long that was common in the Sinai area and in Egypt. And they had a black ibis there in Egypt that was said to feed on them. But their bite was deadly, it was venomous, and it was deadly. So these are animals that they knew, and they would be perfect as a way of describing the bite of Satan's lies. Because there are things that cause us to do bad things that are said to bite us. In the Proverbs, we have a chapter about wine being a mocker. Okay? And what does it do in the end? It bites like an adder. What's an adder? It's a snake. It's a serpent. Okay? What does that mean? That alcohol or wine has the bite of a snake, not just how it tastes. He's talking about the death that it brings, the terrible effects that it brings. But think about the bite of the words of Satan here in the life of Adam and Eve. They were driven from paradise and from the presence of God. So here you have the idea of a serpent who is in the image of, in the days of Moses, the counselors to Pharaoh and the counselors to kings all over the world. And communicating with the dead and yet giving to them the false religions of idolatry and all the mythologies and all the superstitions. It's amazing. It's amazing to study all of the crazy ideas that they had as a result of these mythologies. I'd like you to read with me Isaiah 29 and 14. I'm talking too much and I'm not reading the Bible like I should be. Isaiah 29 and 14 is a good example of this language. In verse 13, the Lord said, "Because this people draw near with their mouth and honor me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me, and their fear of me is a commandment taught by men. Therefore, behold, I will again do wonderful things with this people, with wonder upon wonder, and the wisdom of their wise men shall perish, and the discernment of their discerning men shall be hidden. Ah, you who hide deep from the Lord your counsel, whose deeds are in the dark, and who say, who sees us? Who knows us? You turn things upside down. Shall the potter be regarded as the clay, that the thing made should say of its maker, he did not make me? Or the thing formed say of him who formed it, he has no understanding." Okay, this is the context, and I'm missing my verse. Let me see what I'm trying to find here. He was supposed to be describing the necromancers here. I know I'm close to it. You recognize verse 13. Jesus quoted this verse to talk about the traditions of men of his day who were they were not able to hear the gospel because of their traditions of men, and their heart was far from him because of that reason.
Go back to as far as 4. It talks about the dust of your speech.
There, okay. Yeah, there you go, verse 4. I don't know why. I must have put that 1 in there by accident. It's the context. It's a beautiful chapter. He calls Israel or Jerusalem Ariel, which is the name of my daughter-in-law. Beautiful name. The city where David encamped. Then in verse 4 he says, "And you will be brought low. From the earth you shall speak. And from the dust your speech will be bowed down. Your voice shall come from the ground like the voice of a ghost, and from the dust your speech shall whisper. Okay, this word whisper is a word akin to the word nakash for serpent. This is the sound of the snake. That also is the way in chapter 8 that the necromancers would talk. Look in chapter 8 and verse 19. Okay, and when they say to you, inquire of the mediums and the necromancers who chirp and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Should they inquire of the dead on behalf of the living? To the teaching, to the testimony, if they will not speak according to this word, it is because they have no dawn. What happens at dawn? The light, okay? The day dawn. They will pass through the land greatly distressed and hungry, and when they are hungry, they will be enraged, and will speak contemptuously against their king and their God, and turn their faces upward, and they will look to the earth, but behold, distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish, and they will be thrust into thick darkness. Did you know, incidentally, that there are a couple of people in the Old Testament whose name is Nakash? Look with me in 1 Samuel 11 and 1. Yes. 1 Samuel chapter 11 and verse 1. Then Nahash the Ammonite went up and besieged Jabesh Gilead, and all the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, make a treaty with us, and we will serve you. This man becomes very important in the lives of the Israelites because it's the beginning of the reign of Saul as king. And Saul rallies Israel together, and they go out and they fight against Gilead, and they rescue the people of Jabesh. And we have the name of Nahash again in chapter 12 and verse 12. It's still him, I believe. And when you saw that Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, came against you, you said to me, no, but a king shall reign over us when the Lord your God was your king. That's Samuel talking to Israel about that decision. 2 Samuel 10. 2 Samuel 10 and verse 2. So David sent by his servants to console him concerning his father, and David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites. But the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanun, their lord, do you think because David has sent comforters to you that he is honoring your father? Has not David sent his servants to you to search and to see and to spy it out, to overthrow it? So Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half the beard of each and cut off their garments in the middle at their hips and sent them away. Now Hanun...
You're looking for verse 2.
Verse 2. I should have started at verse 2. Okay. Hanun, the son of Nahash, okay, son of Serpent, okay. Was he the son of a snake?
Not literally.
Not literally, but that was a name, okay. Okay. Let me see. Let me take you to Exodus 4, 1 through 6. Here is the account of Moses making the brass serpent. That can't be right.
Numbers 21 is the bronze serpent.
Yeah, yeah. My typing was awful today. That's, what is it, Numbers what?
Numbers 21.
Numbers 21. I'm sure I've got that written down somewhere right. Okay, Numbers 21. Help me find that right quick. Okay.
Start reading about 4.
Verse 4. Okay.
Verse 5 is where it first mentions, I'm sorry, 6.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, verse 4. And from Mount Hor they set out by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people became impatient on the way. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and we loathe this worthless food. Then the Lord sent fiery serpents, there's the word seraph and the word nachash together, among the people, and they bit the people so that many people of Israel died. And the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent, set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten when he sees it shall live. So Moses made a bronze serpent and set it on a pole, and if a serpent bit anyone, he would look on the bronze serpent and live. They later gave that serpent a name and made a god out of it. You remember the name of the god? Nehushtan. Okay? Nehushtan is a combination of the word bronze and the word serpent. And the word bronze sounds like serpent almost. It's just one letter off. It's almost exactly the same word. You change a letter and it goes from serpent to bronze. So the two to come together, and then in the days of Hezekiah in his days destroyed the serpent. This is 2 Kings 18 and verse 4, because the people had made a god out of that. Moses had warned in Deuteronomy, I've got it, 8, 11, I think it's 18. Let me see. Deuteronomy, okay, yeah, at chapter 8, that's correct. They take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and so forth. In verse 14, then your heart be lifted up and you forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And then verse 17, beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me to wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers as it is today. If you forget the Lord your God and go after other gods and serve them and worship them, I solemnly warn you today, you shall surely perish. Like the nation that the Lord makes to perish before you, so shall you perish, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. Now over in chapter 18, in verse 9, when you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominable practices of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination, or tells fortunes, or interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or a charmer, or a medium, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. I didn't get done. Lord willing, I'll have another chance. I wanted to finish talking to you a little bit about how the word seraph is used in the Old Testament, and then how the word tanin is used for dragon in the Old Testament, and then how that ties into the New Testament in the book of Revelation, and also in the writings of Paul. Thank you so much for your patience with me tonight. I'm going to go back over everything that I typed and double check my verses this time. Make sure I have the right chapter. Thank you. God bless you.
I'm not fast because I'm not sure you can answer me fully.
Okay.